Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unlocked, where we talk about unlocking the potential of you, the people you work with, and the people you do life with. At the time of this recording, I'm offering all of you, yes, my lovely listeners, a free 15-minute communication coaching call. You come with some kind of communication problem, and I give you a solution. My calendar link is in the show notes, so check that out. Tom Henschel is going to talk to us today as a coach about coaching. And this is really important. I've never really covered this on the show as a coach myself and hanging out with coaches. I thought, let's have somebody on the show that is all about this and has been doing it for a long time and could share some insights and perspectives on his idea about coaching and why he even got into this in the first place. So Tom has been coaching senior leaders at companies like Netflix and TikTok and Warner Brothers for more than 30 years. He specializes, and we'll talk about this right at the beginning of the show, which is really interesting. He coaches rising women in their careers and what they have going on in their lives. He helps leaders, he says, achieve the look and sound of leadership, which is the name of his podcast. So go check that out. It's really good, everybody. It's really good. The look and sound of leadership. So check that out. And he works with what he calls disruptive executives. That sounds fun. Disruptive executives. So we cover some things on the show about, what is it that coaching does? Why do we have coaches now? Why are we looking at coaches differently than we did decades ago? And what's the difference kind of as we go further in our careers of how we look at ourselves versus how we looked at ourselves younger in our lives? How do we unlock those things in us to be able to be the best leader we need to be for those we lead? So I'm grateful for Tom, and we are going to have fun on this interview. Tom is just a warm presence. He's very approachable. I hope you get that through this interview. Here we go. Take two, Tom and Scott. Here we are, because my technology glitched, and now we get to do this again. Here we go.
Woohoo.
Okay. Thank goodness we were only like 30 seconds into the call.
Yeah, right.
And
I
not
thought
like
the same thing.
Not 3 hours into our call, like we're gonna do here. I'm just kidding. We're not doing 3 hours, Tom. Not doing 3 hours.
I would.
I know you would.
I would.
I know you would. Let me let's intro this thing a little bit. I want to talk about an audience that you serve, and you talked about women rising in their careers as an audience, segment that you serve. And I would sit there and I'd go, oh, that's really interesting. And if I was in that space, I would go, like I would have this like imposter syndrome feel, or I would go, so I coach a lot of people. I coach women, men, all types of individuals, right? Different cultures, different backgrounds. But to specialize in that niche, I would go, oh, what insight do I have as a white male to teach women rising in their corporate careers about anything? But you do it. Tell me about that.
It started through one nonprofit and then grew into a second nonprofit. One is called Women's Impact Alliance, and they do women all over the world working in the nonprofit sector. And a second group that I work with is called Women in Animation, which is exactly what it says. But again, animation's global and it's very male dominated. And in both cases, I volunteered as a coach, and it's been so fantastic to help women who just they don't know what the future looks like, and many of them don't have mentors yet. And so you're right. I mean, I was taught to coach by a woman who is a militant feminist. And so that's the school I came from anyway. So I'm really comfortable talking to women about women's issues. And it's been inspiring. These young women are they're on fire. They're fantastic.
That is so cool. Is it women that are younger in their careers, or is it seasoned professionals, or is it the whole gamut?
It tends to be women who are younger in their careers, not necessarily chronologically. I do have a couple of founders who I'm talking to, and so they're dealing with a kind of different level of challenges and thinking about their organizations, in a more senior way. But most of them, they're just starting to manage people. They're just starting to be in bigger companies. Uh, Women in animation often are really struggling just because they're parts of teams where often they get diminished, or they kind of can't find the leverage. It's terrific, and I'm really glad to be helping them. Some of them I've stayed in touch with literally for years and years and watched their careers go. It's been so inspiring. It's great.
That's really cool. That's really
It
cool.
is.
Okay, let's talk. So you've been in this space for 30 years. And that's quite a while. I feel like a tiny baby when I am sitting here talking to you, compared to what you've been doing. Now, I've been in the communication space for over 20 years. Coaching specifically, not right, not that full 20. But what have you learned in 30 years as a coach? Like, what is it like? You've heard it. You've heard it all, I would think, at this point. What have you learned as a coach, coaching people in all walks of life as they're moving through life and their careers?
Wow. A lot. It's been amazing to listen to people. One of the things that really surprised me and continues to surprise me is that I can talk to people at the most senior level, and at some point, they struggle with confidence like everybody else. Talking to a CEO who's got an issue with her board, and she's suddenly literally just feeling less than, and I'm like going, whoa. you know Nobody's higher than you and you're still struggling with it. That's one of the things that's been helpful and revelatory to me, is like everybody has their struggle. It doesn't matter how big their title is, how big their paycheck is, how big their profile is. People struggle. That's one. Another that I've been really grateful for, Scott, which is just an evolution, I think, partly in the world, is that when I started, and I started with a group of people, we were often asked to come into big companies and fix what we called brilliant jerks. People who are, they're too good to fire because they're so valuable, but man, oh man, they're too hard to keep around because everybody's pissed off at them and they're just such a problem. And we were like, no, 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 we don't fix people. That's not our job. That's your job. Like, they're your employee. We work with high performers. And the companies used to go, well, we don't need help with our high performers. They're already high performers. And we were like, no, no, you don't get it. We can make your high performers better. That was a really hard sell. People did not get that. Now, I think it's not an issue anymore. It's very rare that I get asked to kind of fix someone, like, oh, if the coaching doesn't work, we're going to fire him. I rarely hear that anymore. But we used to hear that all the time. So that's something that's changed that I'm really grateful for. Coaching is seen as a perk.
What do you think what's that mentality shift that's happened then over the decades that is now this idea of like coaching as a perk, coaching as something we look to as something that can help us in our career and help our people? And what's been the shift?
I think it's familiarity. The fact that it's, been in the mainstream press, that high profile leaders talk about it, that there's people like Marshall Goldsmith, who, as a kind of celebrity coach, right, that has such a high profile, and people go, well, I'd like to have that. So I think the fact that it's exposed to people, and people often negotiate it now, like when they're coming from one company to another, and they're coming in and they say, great, but in 6 months I want to coach. Once I get my feet on the ground, I want to coach. And that's a part of their contract. It's like, that's interesting. I think it's just that people know that it's out there and see that it makes a difference for people. Look, I've gotten people promoted. There's no question about it, where they probably would have gotten a promotion sooner or later, no matter what. But working with me, and it just doesn't have to be me, but working with a coach accelerates the process, and everybody gets what the benefit is.
I often, talk about, and we, mention this probably multiple times as coaches and trying to argue the fact of, or debate the fact of why coaching is important or talk about that in general. And we say, as kids, we all had coaches, we had teachers, we had people bringing us up. We had everywhere we looked, there was somebody building us, teaching us something, mentoring us, something. And then there's like this switch that happens. And I don't know when it actually happens. I don't know if it's like the first day you get a job, when this switch happens where it's like, okay, all that's done. Now you're on your own. And it's kind of this, why do we think that for the first 20-ish years of our life we need that, and then the rest, the 50 years that come after that, we don't? So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think one of the curses of being a senior leader is the burden of expertise. That I think the leaders themselves often think, I better be smart. They're paying me a lot of money. I got a lot of power. I've got a lot of responsibility. I better get it right. And so then it's very hard to go, and I wonder who could teach me. It's hard to be vulnerable at that point because you think the job is to be excellent. And so I think there's pressure there. That's that kind of lonely thing at the top. But also too, if we just had a big old party and had people in the room and went around and asked people, what are they learning these days? I don't think as adults we think of that as an activity that adds value. We think of discipline often like, oh, well, I run 4 times a week, or, I do my Pilates, or I do TM or transcendental meditation, or whatever it is that people are doing in discipline. They have disciplines, but they often don't have teachers. And I just find that that's part of being a grown-up. And then people find support groups and they're so relieved, whether it's support group for parenting, like, oh, how do I parent my adopted child? Or I've got a kid with mental health issues or whatever. And they find a support group and they go, oh my God, I'm not alone. And then they begin to see, oh, there's value in it. But I don't think we're wired for it as adults. I think we feel like we're supposed to have the answers as adults.
Do you think that's a cultural thing?
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. That's very interesting. I will say this. I coach many more people in Asia, India, Japan, Korea than I do in Europe. I coach some in Europe, but not much. I don't know if that's cultural or not. That's really interesting. But I do imagine, I don't know this, Scott, I would have to ask others, but I do think that there is something in Asian cultures that does respect elders and learning in a different way than we do in the West, including here in America. That's I've never thought of it that way.
Well, that's your next book idea, Tom. There you go.
Or yours.
No, no, I'm just about to launch mine. I'm done for a little bit. So I'm not one of those addictive, like psychopath authors that is like, oh yeah, I'm almost done with this one, but I have 3 more in the can, and I've already halfway written that. I'm just like, what are you drinking, man? Like,
I know.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of who makes a good candidate for coaching. Like, if there's people out there and they're like, yeah, I get it. Like, I think the coaching thing's fine, or nah, I don't need, like, where are we in that spectrum? Who do you find really does well with the whole coaching thing and those that don't?
Boy, I've been looking at this forever, partly because I go into situations and often if I have a sense of like, this is not a good candidate, I don't want that gig, right? So it's been important to me to kind of be able to suss it out. And I found that there are 4 kind of big buckets that indicate some readiness for coaching. And I don't expect that any leader would have all 4 of them, but I want to see at least 2 of them. One ties exactly into what we were just talking about, which is this desire to learn, just curiosity. I was coaching someone recently, and this became the issue in his coaching was he was so incurious I suddenly started treating it like a game at one point, where I would throw out something with a huge piece of meat on it, and he would never even ask about it. He would just like, and it was about him, by the way. It was something that I thought would interest him about himself. He wasn't curious at all, and that became part of the coaching. And of course, trying to teach someone to be curious is like a little bit being in a hall of mirrors. It's hard, but that's one, curiosity. Another is self-reflection. Does somebody have a connection to their inner life? I'm working with a woman right now. She's really smart and she's not defensive, but she really doesn't ask herself much of anything. She doesn't know her inner workings. She doesn't think about her own thinking. So she's tough to coach because it's hard just to get started because she's not rich in her inner life. So that's number two, self-reflection. Number three would be responsibility, self-responsibility. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have had people often where, one of the ways that I start the coaching is with a 360-degree feedback report. And I grant you, they can be hard to read. A lot of data about you and how people experience you. I get it. But when I'm like in my fourth or fifth coaching session and we're still debating the feedback, it's like, wow, I'm concerned that's not going well. This person doesn't have a sense of like, yeah, that's how I show up in the world. Yes, I own that as a piece of responsibility. That's not a good indicator that they're going to be a good coaching client, right? Because I can't make them take responsibility, right? So, and then the fourth one is resilience. If in the face of any event, whatever it might be, a bad report, a bad outcome, bad numbers, whatever, if you're going to literally fall apart and need to take to your bed, you may not be a good coaching candidate. That might be hard. So those are my four. I don't know how they
Okay.
sound to you.
I like those. Those are really good. Um,
Hey, can I make you an offer
go.
on something?
Oh yeah, please.
So I I have a PDF with this on it, and I'm happy to share it with you and your listeners if they're interested. Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Please do that. I'll include that in the show notes for sure for
great, I'll
everybody.
send it to
I
you.
think
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that'd
it's
be really
helpful.
good. I think for HR leaders, everybody else who's listening to this, they may use this as something to kind of, are they ready? Is this
Yeah,
person ready for coaching? Or maybe themselves looking at it saying, am I ready for coaching? Some of them may look at it and go, oh yeah, I'm not really, that self-reflection thing is kind of, I don't know if I don't know if I'm really great at that, which is maybe why they need coaching.
maybe. Yes, maybe.
So I don't know. I think there's elements there. I think that's why you said you look for at least two of them.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So you don't have to have all four. It's not like a slam dunk, right? So
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, somebody who's got all four is pretty highly evolved. That's going to be a pretty interesting coaching work because you're going to start at a pretty deep level. But no, I don't expect that.
yeah. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Let's talk about I'm curious about this. I don't know where this is gonna go. This might detour us a little bit, Tom,
Okay. Good.
but you came from an acting career. So acting, you transitioned into coaching. What did that tell us about the acting career first? I don't know if I, saw you on Different Strokes or
Yes, you
on,
did.
family
As a matter of
family.
fact.
Really?
Yes, you did.
Are you
Well,
serious?
if you saw that episode, I was on an episode of Different Strokes. As a matter of fact, yes, I
Oh, that's so cool. Now I got to go back and watch all the episodes of Different Strokes
oh my
um,
God.
to kind of find where you are. But looking at that career of acting and then transitioning to what you have been doing for decades now, what was that journey like? How'd you get into acting? And then what did you take with you from the acting career that makes you, be the coach that you want to be now?
Hmm. Wow. So first started saying I wanted to be an actor when I was 10, and I was a little Jewish kid in the suburbs of Chicago. That's not what that's not what people were saying in those days. So it was weird, and people Luckily I was in a school district that had lots of the arts, so I had a lot of opportunity to actually work on it. Then I got to go to the Juilliard School and drama division when it just was starting. We didn't have any graduates yet, so it wasn't like it is now, where all these Academy Award winners and are out of Juilliard. But that's where I went to school, so I got trained like crazy. And I came to the West Coast. I'd worked in theater and television for a long time. I made my living. I bought a house. I put my kid in private school. I did okay, and during all of that, I taught. So, like when I was at Juilliard in the summers, I would teach at Northwestern University, and when I came to Hollywood, I would teach at a conservatory. I just always liked to teach, and I think I was a good teacher. And I moved into directing too, which was an extension of teaching, and I liked all of that. And it was pretty clear to me. It was pretty clear to me at a certain point that I was doing okay, but I was not going to have a career that was going to make me, you know, a healthy living when I was 60. Like, I had to find something else to do. And as sad as that was, and it was very sad for me to give up my kind of life dream. I thought I was going to be a teacher. And I taught for 2 semesters in a university here in Southern California and was very unhappy, did not like it, and found corporate training and started as a presentation skills coach, which was really easy, right? I mean, I could do that in my sleep, and I still do it, and I love it because people need the help, and I've got the language, and I can see it really fast. So I like that. And then someone plucked me. This woman that I talked about, this militant feminist woman, said, "I'm starting a coaching company. I'd like you to join us." And I was like, "Sure." Because, by the way, actors always say yes, right? Even if you can't do it. So I said yes to her. And then I suddenly was coaching. So that was how I made the transition. In terms of what's different now, I want to tell you, first off, I'm so much happier. I was very sad to leave the profession, and I'm so much happier now than I was. What's different now is I feel like my career is about others, and that's much more satisfying to me. That when I was acting, I always felt my career was about me. And I think part of why I was not a great success was because that was never a comfortable space for me. So that's been a big difference, and it's been really meaningful to me. I still feel in some way I'm a teacher, right? I'm a helper. I'm a support person. So that part stays the same.
That's really cool. I Something just hit me when you said, it was about me and now it's for others. And I went through this personally with my mid-career crisis, where, starting out as a young designer, graphic designer out of school and going to work at an agency up in Chicago, outside in suburbs of Chicago. We lived up in northwest suburbs, kind of Elgin, West Dundee area. If you know where
Oh
that's
my
at.
God. Of course. I grew up in Winnetka.
Did you? Look at that. See, we're like brothers from another mother,
All
Tom.
right. Midwest kids.
That's what we are. But it was very much, and I've noticed this about, and I think it's interesting, this transition, this trend of younger individuals that come out of school. It's about them. And I don't even necessarily care about what profession you're necessarily in. It's this feeling of, I've got to make my own money now. I've got to get my own house. I've got to start my own family. I've got to do my own thing. I've got to win my awards. I got to achieve my goals so that I can go through my career and grow so I can have a successful retirement for what I want. I don't know if people think that far in advance when they're younger, but it's really about them. I used to look at like the awards books we got in for the things we would do, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. Look at everybody." Or I'd look at work on that out in the world, out in the wild, you would say, and say, "Yeah, I worked on that." And people are like, "Really?" And then it was like this little badge of pride. And then it hit me. I go, "Who cares?" Like, about who cares about my name printed in this book of awards for this design project? Maybe in the moment for 5 seconds, somebody will care, and then nobody's going to care anymore. And it just kind of gets to this point where I'm going, why am I doing this? Why And like, there's got to be something more. And people start to ask that question. They go, there's got to be something more. There's got to be a bigger impact I'm making. There's got to be something for me out there. And then when people realize that it's the impact comes from your impact on others, your impact on yourself really comes from the impact you create for others. It's like when that little light bulb, I think, goes off. And I think that's probably maybe what you're talking about. I know that I experienced that myself. And the work that I get to do, that we get to do, is about that. And I think that that's something everybody can find and search for. And so that's my analysis. What do you think about that?
One of the things that I am excited about as I listen to the social dialogue just in the culture is that people are talking about purpose at a pretty early age. Why, right? The 9 whys and all that. Like, why are you doing this? And what's important to you? And why? And there's a part of me that goes, that's incredibly self-directed, right? It's really all about me. But in another way, it is about purpose. And I do think that it's true that as we age, I think we go through certain frameworks. And as you say, it's appropriate that, my 25-year-old daughter is in a different place than my 36-year-old daughter, right? That decade between them is an amazing transition, just as it was true when one of them was 15 and one of them was 26, right? So I think it's age appropriate in some ways. And I don't know that evolution that you had of who cares, I don't know if you could have that at 25 years old. I don't know if it would be appropriate. I think it would be weird. So I think it feels age appropriate to me. It's also, by the way, one of the things that I love about working with these young women all around the world is, right, they're at a stage in their career where a step to them is huge if they can get one step up. When you're at a very senior level, one step up actually doesn't make that big of a difference anymore. So I appreciate it and I like it. It's exciting to me.
Yeah, I like that too. And and I guess I'll add on to the perspective and the thought maybe of that it's supposed to be that way. Like it is about kicking off my stuff and grounding myself and finding who I am and doing all my things so that one day I can be prepared to give to others and be prepared to impact others in a greater way. I think it's supposed to be that way. Something interesting that you mentioned, that you find more younger people talking about purpose and why. And this is something, let me ask you, in you're from a different generation than I am. Let's talk about that. Do you think it's a generational thing? Do you think that do you identify as a boomer or and
Probably. Yeah, I'm
probably
very,
a
very,
late
very, very tail end of boomer. Yes, I am. I
late
am.
late boomers? Okay. So do you, that boomer mentality was a lot about escalation through my career, rewards, recognition, bonus, climbing the corporate ladder. And it became, that was an identity, that work, that identity that they had. Although the younger generations, I'll say, we talk a lot about the millennials, is that it is a lot about what difference am I making in the world? What
Yeah.
difference is my job right now having on others? And that is, I think, that beginning of that purpose work that you might be talking about. Do you think it's a generational thing?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, when we think about what we're exposed to these days, whether it's people like Simon Sinek or Adam Grant or whatever, that Brene Brown, that young people are exposed to those people. They follow those people. They're hearing those thoughts. You and I didn't get to hear those thoughts growing up, right? So yeah, I think I'll give you I'll give you a really good example. Early in my career as a trainer facilitator, I learned a game that was so fantastic because it was really simple and it was hard, and teams always had problems solving it. And then once they got it, they really got it. And it was this transformative moment that made them laugh and they got it. And it was a learning that was sticky. I ended up doing that game with my daughter's birthday parties when she was like 10. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting. There are grown-ups in the world who do not know this game, but now there's a whole bunch of kids who do know this game. And that changes those kids. I really believe it does. And kids have all kinds of experiences. No, and by the way, some of them are negative. We're concerned about Instagram and what being online does. We're worried about their brains and all that. But yes, I think kids are exposed to ideas sooner than I was. Sure. Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I I think it has its own challenges, but it's not innately negative.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. What's the game, Tom? You can't just leave me hanging. You gonna give me a little bit of like what the game is?
It's a little hard to explain, but it's an invisible maze that there is. You have to discover the path through a maze through cooperation, and it's set up as a competition, but it's actually about cooperation. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And
Okay.
yeah, and if you play it as competition, you kind of can never solve it, or you solve it and it's painful. But if you do it as collaboration, and it takes some teams a long time to figure out that, like, oh, we could be collaborating. These people are not in competition with us. It's hard. It's great.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
That's
fun.
really good. That's
Yeah.
really good. Cool. Let's talk about this coming back around to this idea of coaching people that we've talked about people becoming unlocked through their careers, through their lives, and how is that idea of coaching take part in that? How does coaching play a role in people's development and as they grow? What is it that you've seen that coaching has really helped accelerate that? How does it do that? How does it work?
I think when it's really powerful, I think I think someone who is getting coached moves to a place of self-acceptance. Yes, I have these development areas. They're probably going to be with me my entire career. I own them. They do help me at times, and at times they don't. I want to accept them and manage them. And to do that, I need to become highly aware of them. And I think that movement towards self-acceptance, as opposed to shame or trying to hide it or deny it or be defensive, that's an evolution, a real mature evolution that allows leaders to show up in a completely different way. I don't know what that sounds like to you, but I think that's a big one. I've seen that happen to people. It's powerful.
That's beautiful. The reason why is because I believe somewhat the same things. I think
Oh,
that
good.
one of the reasons I went into this was to give people permission to be who they were designed to be. Owning it and just saying, you know what, I am not that, and that's okay. There's a lot of we call the oughts and shoulds of life of you ought to be this way, you should be this way, you should talk like this, you ought to be, and it impermeates us, and it kind of and we've been taught those things since we were young, and then we live with those things through our careers, and it's just those voices that we grew up with that didn't maybe necessarily give us permission to be that, to accept who we were, and so I love how you said that. It's that self acceptance that people have, and that light bulb that goes off that says it's okay that I'm this. It's okay. You know.
Right. Yep.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I've been dealing it with people, again, since I was young, around nervousness, right? Where people somehow aren't comfortable for whatever reason being looked at, being seen, and it sets off anxiety in them. And I was talking to a woman yesterday. This is a highly accomplished chief marketing officer. She's so good, and she's nervous. She has nerves. I didn't surprise me, but yeah, being able to help someone kind of get over that and move towards acceptance and manage their nerves, yeah, it's helpful.
It is. You've got a fantastic podcast, the look and sound of leadership that is out there in the world. You've got quite a lot of episodes out there. I don't know how you come up with all that great content, but it's really good. And there's tidbits and there's things for people to gather. I went and I told you I listened to that episode on defensiveness, and you don't just give like a couple little tips. Like you give some meat in those things. Like I'm feeling coached through those things, and I love that about your show. So I hope everybody will go check that out and take advantage of the advice and the tips and the guidance you give there. I think that's really, really good. So if people want to find out more about you and they want to inquire more about your thoughts and ideas and whatnot, where do they go?
Well, first they can listen to the show, The Look and Sound of Leadership. That's one. But I run a company called Essential Communications, and we have a website with lots and lots of free resources the URL is essentialcom with two M's.com. And one of the tabs there is called Essential Tools, and you can just go in and download whatever you want. There's lots there.
That's cool. Love it. Thank you for giving to the world. Thanks for giving to my listeners. I really appreciate you. Tom, it's been fun. Good luck on everything you're doing.
Thanks, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You may think you are the only one, but you're not. People at all levels, as Tom says, struggle with something. And he's noticed in his career that it's that confidence thing that we tend to go through. And I'll say this, and I'm going to add this on there, this cycle of, feeling overly confident and then being humbled through the process of growth in our roles and our responsibilities and whatever we do. And then we become really confident in that thing because we've learned and we've grown and we've failed and we've gotten better. And now we're good at that thing again. But then we go right back into what we call our unconscious incompetence, that thing of like, we step into a new role, a new position, a new company, a new phase of life, and we don't really know what we're good at. So confidence is something that Tom has found that, he addresses a lot with a lot of his clients. The burden of expertise. I really like that idea of the burden of expertise, of leadership, that they feel this burden. They feel like they have to be the best ones, the smartest ones, the most brilliant ones, the most experienced ones in the room. Oftentimes they are, but oftentimes they're not. And it's that, how do we build a bridge of vulnerability? How do we let down some walls to make sure that we are being the kind of leader that is building influence through things, instead of putting up walls of protected, insecurity walls that we that end up keeping people out and also keep us in. That's also a problem. I like these 4 buckets to being ready. So that desire to learn, that curiosity. Are you curious? How do you know if you're ready for coaching? Are you curious? Do you have the ability to self-reflect? Can you spend some time concentrating on who you are, what you are, and some of the things that you need to reflect on? Can you take responsibility? And can you have just some resilience? Can you take the news? Can you take the feedback? Can you grow into who you need to be and bounce back in a healthy way? It's all about having permission to be who you were designed to be. It's about unlocking the things in you so that you know what you are great at, what you're not so great at, what others are great at, what they're not so great at, so we can all build and help each other together. Let's build healthy cultures worth being part of, that are not toxic, that are not full of me against you, but that we can thrive and that we can be the healthy people we want to be. If you want to find out more information about me or check out the show notes where there's going to be more information and links to the things referenced in this episode, visit skotwaldron.com. And lastly, I'm asking for a little bit of love, just a little bit. So please take a moment, follow, rate the show. The algorithms like that. It helps me get the word out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And until next time, stay unlocked.